Manifestos came out this week. I think it's fair to say that they're not the most thrilling of documents.
Speak for yourself.
Labour's was like record short length of recent years. It did have 35 pictures of Keir Starmer on it, though, in case you'd forgotten who he was and whether his dad's a toolmaker or not. Tom, I mean, one thing did come up in the Labour manifesto. It's definitely of interest of our viewers is they're proposing a kind of watered down form of self-identification.
Yeah.
Proposing to ban what they call trans conversion therapy, which is essentially a kind of almost like a little bit of a reversal of the Cass review type thing. It's like saying you should affirm children's gender identity. Equally, earlier this week, Keir Starmer said he was going to put an end to the culture war. Mm-hmm. I don't think those two ideas can match up.
No, I don't. I think you're right, and I think it's striking that despite the fact that Keir Starmer is supposedly pursuing this kind of Ming Vase strategy, not wanting to do anything that might get him on the wrong side of Middle England, doesn't want to rock the boat, doesn't want to appear too radical. That could be on spending, that could be on foreign policy, although that's a whole another kettle of fish where him and his party are concerned, generally wanting to see him as the kind of reasonable median voter's dream. And yet I think it's fascinating that when push comes to shove, when it comes to these woke issues more broadly, but gender issues in particular, they still feel the need to capitulate, largely speaking because of their own party itself, as well as activists and their kind of new base in the kind of metropolitan centres. But the fact that after all of the controversy that we've had over the gender issue, the fact that even after the Cass review, which just completely laid waste to the case for so-called gender affirming care, the fact that Keir Starmer has been forced to, in effect, say that he got it wrong, to not quite apologise to his own MP, Rosie Duffield, who was pursuing a very stridently gender-critical line all of these years and getting a lot of flack for doing so. The fact that still you see this trans-inclusive conversion therapy ban make it into the manifesto, I think is telling about ultimately what side their bread is buttered, if you like. They will always, in the end, capitulate to this stuff. And it is worth stressing, because this stuff is very purposely confusing, but a ban on trans conversion therapy is effectively a ban on any form of talking therapy, any attempt to talk through a child, say, issues with their gender and identity, and basically just taking an uncritical affirming approach. And given the fact that, as we know, the majority of the kids who show up in gender clinics tend to be gay or bisexual, it's kind of a form of gay conversion therapy by the back door when you think about it. So that's really horrendous. And you've then got things like the Race Equality Act, which they've talked about, which again sounds fine on paper, but you dig into it and it's kind of DEI ideology on steroids. I just think it's so interesting that even the kind of centre left at its most boring technocratic vote chasing mode still has to capitulate to this stuff. Although that was a revealing moment for them.
Definitely. And Jake, I mean, there was the Sky News battle for number 10 this week. I think it's probably the first time of this campaign that Starmer's been sort of held to his account for his flip-flopping. Certainly there was a revealing moment where he tried to explain his support for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the two key moments of the Keir Starmer interview were when he was asked about Jeremy Corbyn and when he tried to give the audience a sense of the profession that his father had done, which none of us can remember because he's barely mentioned it at all in the campaign. But with regard to Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, Beth Rigby did a very good job in saying, look, you supported Jeremy Corbyn, then you kicked him out. You were left-wing. Now you've jettisoned that left-wing agenda. What's going on? Yeah. And he came out with some quite extraordinary responses. With regard to Corbyn, he said, well, effectively, I only supported him because I knew he would lose. And I think to any ordinary person, you would think, why would you support somebody who's going to lose? Yeah. I mean, surely you would support someone that you think is going to win. That's why you support them. And also, it also tacitly acknowledged that he had the capacity to get behind an agenda that he didn't believe in. Yeah. And if that's the case, now he's switched up his agenda to become more centrist and more pro-growth because he thinks that's going to win the election, and it almost certainly will. How can we believe that he actually believes that? Yeah. And isn't just doing that because he thinks he's going to win. Now, I mean, speaking to Labour people, supporters of Starmer, they make the argument that he supported Corbyn because the party had become so dominated by the hard left that the next leader would need to be elected by the hard left. And so he played along and masqueraded as a hard left figure so that he could then become elected as the next leader and then carry out this massacre of the hard left and come out as who he really is. But the problem is that I think for the public, no one really trusts that we know who he really is because he's changed so much. And it did really seem to be a case of, if you don't like these principles, I have others.
Yeah.
I mean, he said that when he was explaining about going from left to the centre, he said it was because he decided that he has to put the country before the party. So does that mean that before, for the rest of his political career up until that point, he was putting the party before the country? And if so, that's quite an indictment of his career. And it's quite a Damascene conversion. And how can we trust that it was authentic? And of course, then when I think there's a whole lot else to be said about the moment that he was heckled for saying that his father was a toolmaker, which we can go into if you want to.
That led to a very, very loud groan from the audience there. I mean, it's interesting. He also said, that changing to become a sort of centrist was him listening to the people. And you think, well, why didn't you listen to the people after the Brexit referendum? He said, I'm not going to listen to the people. That was his whole shtick.